Hello, Rhode Island. Thank you very much. Great to be with you. I'm taking all these guys home with me. Please sit down. Thank you very much. Steve, thank you so very much. Now, I doubt whether I had been here, you would have hugged me and pulled me in your truck, but I would have asked to get in your truck. I used to drive a truck when I was in college to pick up some extra money, and for a little while drove an 18-wheeler, but I always wanted to drive a big snowplow, and particularly the last 10 years in Washington. I know exactly where I'd drive it. I know exactly where I'd take it. There's a lot of things I'd like to move. Gov, thank you so much for inviting me. Actually, I kind of invited myself because the Gov and I were talking. We were at a larger meeting and talking about infrastructure. And as Jack, I heard part of your introduction, Jack was overly generous, and thank you very much. In Washington for the last 25 years, or longer, they refer to it as middle-class Joe. In Washington, that's not meant as a compliment necessarily. It means you're not sophisticated. But I know I'm pretty sophisticated about a couple things. And the one thing I'm sophisticated about is that unless the middle class is growing, everybody is eventually in trouble. When the middle class is doing well, the wealthy does very, very, very well, and the poor have a shot, have a way up. And it's kind of like we lost the connective tissue between, let me define what I mean by middle class. I have a lot of, several very, very well-known economists that work for me, and when you say middle class, they will begin to give you a number. Middle class is not a number. Middle class is a value set. It's about being able to own your own home and not have to rent it. It's about being able to send your kid to a park where you know they're going to come home safely. It's about being able to send your kid to a local public high school. They know if they do well, they'll get into college. If they get into college, you'll find a way to get them there. And you'll be able to take care of mom or dad when the other one passes, and hope your kids never have to take care of you. That's what middle class used to be. For the first time in the last 75 years, America's middle class is not the wealthiest middle class in the world. First time. For the first time, and my colleagues know this, Stephen and Jim know, and they all know it. For the first time, a majority of Americans are not in the middle class. There used to be a basic bargain in America. The bargain was, if you contributed to the prosperity of the enterprise you belonged to, you got to share in the value that was increased in that operation. That's changed too. And so Jack's got it right. We've worked together a long, long time. We, figuratively speaking, come from the same neighborhood. You know, folks, no one I grew up with that I can recall ever thought the government owed them anything other than a shot. I really mean that. Government didn't owe anything. My dad used to say, I don't expect government to solve my problem, but I at least expect them to understand what my problem is. And I had a good friend named Bob Gold. I'd say, Bob, do you understand what I'm saying? He'd look at me and say, Joe, I not only understand you, I overstand you. People overstand what the problem is. So I don't know anyone's a more fierce advocate, ferocious advocate for middle-class folks, people of Rhode Island, the kind of folks we grew up with, than the senior senator from this state. And by the way, as a point of personal privilege, as we say in the Senate, Jack is genuinely, not figuratively, genuinely a national treasure. There is nobody. There is no one in public life who is more respected or has a greater depth of expertise in foreign policy and defense policy than Jack. Matter of fact, Jack wouldn't say it. I can say it now. Jack, I'm leaving. So what the hell are they going to do? The fact of the matter is that we tried to get Jack to consider being Secretary of Defense, but he wouldn't leave Rhode Island. And Sheldon Whitehouse. There's a guy who is the biggest pain in the neck I know. You know why? He's my friend. The two things you got to know about him: one, he never gets up, and two, he's smarter than you. And he's relentless. I get more letters, more calls. Joe, we need this much money in Rhode Island. Joe, we need more funding for infrastructure. Joe, there is a $1 billion program that's competitive for infrastructure. Joe, we have an application for $650 million of it. How about Joe? Jack, I mean, Sheldon, I can't guarantee it. You know what I mean? But I promise you, everybody knows. Everybody knows. Everybody knows. What's 175 million bucks among friends, right? I call Congressman Cicilline, I call him the mayor. He used to be the mayor, and the reason I call him the mayors will appreciate this. Mayors get things done. Mayors don't get a chance to decide, as the mayor of New York said, whether it's Republican garbage or Democratic garbage. They don't get a chance to decide whether the road is a snow on a Republican street or a Democratic street. It doesn't matter. They get things done. And I want to tell you, David's been doing a great job. Jim and I have been friends for a long while. Jim's been kind enough to come to the Vice President's residence a number of times, and he's one of the most thoughtful, decent, most respected men in the United States Congress. And I can tell you, it goes a long, long way. As you may have, I'm sure it never crossed your mind, I come from that other small state. And let me tell you, the size of the integrity and intellect of your congressional representatives makes up for and needs to make up for the size of your state. Because the truth of the matter is there's limited federal resources. And when people are able to establish reputations in the United States Congress and Senate for their integrity and for never misleading their colleagues, it matters in the crunch. It matters in the close calls. So I wouldn't argue with you, Governor. I think you have one of the best congressional delegations in the entire United States Congress, and I'm happy to be here. Governor, I talked about this months ago, and I was in the context of meeting with other national leaders and making the case that, as you probably know, and the labor guys know, I've been making ad nauseum for the last 10 years, about the need for significantly greater investment in infrastructure. The American Society of Engineers says, in a totally bipartisan, nonpartisan group, says in order for us to maintain the infrastructure we have today, we need to invest $3.6 trillion by the year 2020, which will not get done, in order to maintain the infrastructure. And that's where the governor came in. She's one of the few governors, along with the governor of New York and a few others, to step up and lead. I wish every governor understood the opportunities that come with modernizing infrastructure. Some of you may remember I was in New York a while ago. Actually, I was there last night on the Intrepid. Was honored to receive an award regarding to the military. But I flew out of LaGuardia this morning. Some of you may remember, because it made the front page of every newspaper in America, that Biden said, no one ever doubts I mean what I say. The problem is I sometimes say all that I mean. But I said that, talking about infrastructure, because there was a sign on an escalator at one of the greatest city in the world, New York, in dealing with an escalator shut down. It said, will be repaired in 4 months. I mean, it struck me. Here we are in the capital of the world, New York City, one of the busiest airports in the world, and they're going to fix an escalator going up to the gates in 4 months. So I said in an interview on television, I said, if I blindfolded you, took you into the airport in Beijing, and then took you into the airport in LaGuardia in the middle of the night, and had you look around and said, which country are you in? You would say you were in the developing country if you were in LaGuardia. And oh, how could Biden say that? What an outrageous, insulting thing to say. Well, 3 days later, I had to fly. I didn't fly. I flew in Air Force Two. We landed in LaGuardia. The Air Force pilots were kidding me, saying, is it safe, Senator? I mean, I'm used to being a senator, Mr. Vice President. Is it safe? And we joked. I went off and did my event in New York, came back, and standing at the steps to get up on Air Force Two are 8 guys looking like your highway crews here. Only they had brown jumpsuits on and orange sashes. And they're waiting there like they were military at the steps. And I thought, oh, God, here we go. I get out. President Union walked up and said, Mr. Vice President, thank you for speaking out. Thank you for saying something. Then the governor called me to say thank you. The mayor called me to say thank you. The Chamber of Commerce called to say thank you. There used to be a bipartisan consensus that, in fact, we invest in infrastructure. And so, when Governor Cuomo put together his plan with the Port Authority, he invited me to come up and announce with him a $4 billion in federal, state, and local and private funds to renovate the airports in the New York City area. Ladies and gentlemen, it's going to create thousands of jobs. It's going to bring business in. Now, here's the point. There's a growing recognition by governors that the need to modernize infrastructure so we can compete. Ladies and gentlemen, there's one thing we know because of the progress of the last 7 years. Companies are coming home. Those lovely young girls there, they're not going to hear what you heard about outsourcing. They're going to hear more about insourcing. Insourcing is what's happening in America today. Folks are coming home. Businesses are coming to the United States that weren't here before. A.T. Kearney does a survey every year. It's the 9th, I think now the 20th year. They ask the same question. They go out and get the 300 largest industrialists in the world. And they say, where is the best place in the world to invest? For the second year in a row, by a margin larger than any time in the study, they say the United States of America. And they don't say it because of Barack Obama and Joe Biden. They say it because of these guys. We have the most productive workforce in the world, 3 times as productive as Asia. We have the cheapest energy in the world. Energy is 7 times cheaper than it is in Asia and 3 times cheaper than it is in Europe. We have a legal system that doesn't steal your property, that protects your intellectual property. We have the most agile venture capitalists in the world, and we have the greatest research universities in the world, matched by no combination of countries. That's why they're coming home. But only 2 things can get in the way. I take pride in playing a small part with the President, taking us from crisis to recovery, But now we're on the verge of a major resurgence. There is not a single reason in the world we will not maintain ourselves as the leading political, military, and economic power throughout this century. Not one. Not one. Used to say, my old neighbor to Claymont. We want the rest of the world to do well, but they're not a patch on our genes. They're not close. Name me a single product, a single innovative product that has anything stamped on it other than made in America, invented in America. We're a vibrant people, and we have a great opportunity now. We have to have the best educated and the best trained workforce in the world. That's for another speech, but that's why we invested $100 billion in education, spent in 18 months. $400 million came right in here to Rhode Island. By the way, every study of that act that almost spent $1 trillion that I ran in 18 months, not more than 0.2% waste or fraud. No other government program in history ever run as efficiently and well. The point is, folks, we know we have what we have to do, but the second thing we have to do is we have to have the most modern infrastructure in the world. And right now, we're not close. We rank the United States of America, built on the back of construction, ranks 28th in the world in transportation infrastructure. Today, only 2 of our ports, from the Gulf of Mexico to Boston, only 2 of them can accommodate the new Panamax ships that are going through the new canals being built, that are virtually twice as big, that can carry almost twice as much cargo for 40% of the cost. 50% compared to most cargo. But guess what? We haven't invested in digging the depths except in 2 ports to 50-foot draft, widening the berth. 78% of everything goes through that canal is leaving the United States or coming to the United States. What are we doing? What in the hell are we doing? You know, when the middle class saw the biggest growth in American history, it was from 1946 to 1973. Everybody talks about how things have changed in digitalization and how we have a global economy, et cetera. That accounts for some of the change. But you know what? During that entire period, we invested 4% of our entire GDP in infrastructure. 4%. We expend less than 1%, close to 0.5% today. It matters. And your governor knows it. Companies are not going to stay in states unless they can cheaply, efficiently, and safely get raw materials to the floor and products out to the global market. It's a simple proposition. If I can build and ship out of Singapore, and I can do it at 20% less cost than I can out of Rhode Island, I'm going to Singapore. They ask, you mayors, everybody talks about coming to your town. What do they ask you? What kind of access to freight rail do you have? How much access do you have in interstate highway system? Do you have broadband network in your town that covers everything? Do you have access to affordable transportation so I can attract some talented workers? You guys know the deal. It's not liberal, it's not conservative, it's not Democrat or Republican, it's the economy of the 21st century. That's where they want to go. You have an incredible workforce here in Rhode Island, a long history, a sophisticated history. And folks, that last piece is critical. We used to talk about urban sprawl. You know what we're talking about today, whether it's in your town or whether it's in Detroit or my town of Wilmington or Los Angeles? We're talking about job sprawl now. It used to be all these enterprises were concentrated downtown. drive through your city on 95, you used to see where the factories used to be. They're not now. Sometimes there's much or better work, higher paying work, but it's not in town. But guess what? On average, over 50% of the people who live in the city who need the jobs don't have transportation available to them to get to those jobs, to go out and do the interview, to show up at work on time. And the average American spends $7,600 a year on transportation, more than they spend on food, twice as much as they spend on out-of-pocket health care costs. Every year, Americans waste 5.5 billion hours stuck in traffic or going around bridges that are dilapidated, not safe to travel on. Americans don't have access to reliable transportation for their own vehicles. And it makes a gigantic difference for a middle-class family. That's why it's so critical what your governor and your legislature is doing. Rhode Island is uniquely situated to take advantage of the insourcing that's coming our way. Nobody understands it better than your governor. Infrastructure is about a lot more than providing people from the ability to move from point A to point B. It is about those middle-class jobs. Nobody's making minimum wage pouring concrete on a highway job. No one's making minimum wage surveying the new road. No one's making minimum wage, and I can go on and on and on. They're making a wage you can raise a family on. This is about economic dynamism, competitiveness. It's about safety, productivity. It's about the kind of country we want to be. And your governor gets it in her bones. Taking some of the worst bridges and worst roads in the entire United States. I just visited one underpass. It's kind of hard to believe. You've all seen it. If you haven't, it's a short walk. For 10 years, you've had Lincoln logs holding the damn thing up. No, I mean, go look at it. The press went and looked at it. If everybody in Rhode Island watched the news tonight and saw that, they'd try to go around the damn bridge. I mean, it is shameful. Like I said, this used to be a bipartisan deal, guys. Jack and I were reminiscing. When I first got to the Senate, I was 29 years old. The biggest promoters of infrastructure were Republicans, even bigger than us. I don't know what happened. God, when you took office, 21% of the state's bridges were structurally deficient. Many of them built with WPA money in the 30s. And they haven't been updated since. By the way, I was in New York last night. I've been, as these guys know because they represent some of the national unions, talking about the need to modernize the tunnels under the Hudson River and going into New York and coming out of New York. Some of them were built in 1860. So they went through a tunnel, like, surprise, surprise, showing that it is crumbling. A major rail section. What in the hell are we doing? So, Gov, you took a lot of heat, I understand. At least that's my impression. But you got the bill passed. You signed it earlier this year to provide $850 million to modernize the infrastructure and make your state more competitive. And you found a funding source. Every other state except Connecticut, and they used to, on the Northeast Corridor, levies a toll on large commercial vehicles rolling through their state. That's not because they're looking for an easy target, because it's about what the highway system is supposed to be. They do the most damage. They're heavy. I'll give you an example. I got a driveway. Secret Service is with me. After being with me 2 months, I couldn't drive down my driveway because the cars are 10,000 pounds. Not a joke. They ripped up my driveway. Where are you guys? No, I'm only kidding. But they had to rebuild the driveway. Not for me, so the cars could move. Well, guys, we need the trucking industry. We need it badly. But it can afford to pay the toll because it's supposed to be proportionate. That's why you pay a gasoline tax to drive on the highways. This $850 million will be on top of $400 million. You have an annual budget for infrastructure, and in the process, It is. The governor's right. I had my guys run the numbers. It's 6,000 jobs. In addition, it creates a virtuous cycle. When you got 6 women and 15 men out there on a construction site, and it's time to break for lunch, what do? They go to a diner in one of your towns. You end up, during that period of time, needing 2 more waitresses, not just the 3 that are there. It means that people have a little more money in their pocket, so they go to the movies more than once a month. It means you can get your hair done maybe 2 more times this year. I mean, this sounds silly, but this is what it does. It generates a virtuous cycle. And everybody does better financially. But God, because of your leadership, the leadership of your delegation, you're in the running for additional funding from the FAST Act, which is Sheldon's, he's got dead aim on it. With good reason, by the way, because you got a good proposal. I am not allowed, I want the press to make it clear, I am not intervening. It is against the law for me to say any one state or locality should get the money. But I can say, I guarantee you'll get looked at very closely. The point is, all kidding aside, it matters. And there's $1 billion here. And folks, as I said, I just got a chance to see some of the proposed improvements Roadworks will bring to the underpass at McCormick Quarry Bridge, and how they're going to do it. Between 17 and 20,000 vehicles are on that overpass every single day. As I understand it, I can't vouch for it personally, but I'm told it's a vital link in the system that connects East Bay communities with I-95. And as I said, it's held up by wooden beams. But Governor, because of your action, it's finally going to get a complete overhaul. And right now the bridge is weight restricted. Heavy trucks that make deliveries into the business of East Bay can't go over that bridge. Well, guess what? Truckers should realize that costs money. To have a detour into Massachusetts just to get back to Rhode Island. For a small business, that's time, that's money. It makes a difference. Now, if you didn't deal with these bridges now, it's only going to become more safe. You're going to have the Federal Highway Commission coming here shutting down some of those bridges, I would guess. What happens then? What are the costs? You know, when people say to me about infrastructure, say, but it costs. I say it's a question of you pay me now or pay me later. The cost is consequential. And if that happens, communities trying to get from the East Bay to Providence would add a minimum of 10 minutes to their trip each way. Clog up arteries on I-95. You're dealing with this the smart way. Instead of closing portions for months at a time to do the work, you're building a new bridge right next to the old one. And on the weekend, you're going to knock down the old one and move the new one over. I told the guys driving the plows, make sure you have the legislature drive over first. But all kidding aside, seriously, we not only know how to build, we know how to build better than we did before, quicker. Governor, what you're doing here is really important. I'm really just here to say thank you and make a point about how important this is, not only to our economy, but to our competitiveness worldwide. Folks, I said at the outset, the economy was in free fall, but we moved. In 2009, we were losing, before I lowered my hand from taking the oath, we had already lost 760,000 jobs that month, over 800,000, and about 800,000 a month for the next 6. There was talk of another depression. Remember what it was like in Rhode Island. In 2009, the unemployment rate was 11%. And at times during the recovery, it was the highest in the nation in Rhode Island. Even before the national recession hit, Rhode Island's economy was beginning to shrink. All told, nearly a decade of lost growth. So the President and I, with the leadership of Senator Reid and White House, knew we had to make some pretty big budget decisions. That's why we did everything from the so-called TARP, bailing out the banks that caused the crisis because there was no choice to stop the bleeding. Then we had to come up with the Recovery Act. And the Recovery Act It was the largest spending program in American history, $840 billion. It's never been done before. The Recovery Act saved or created millions of jobs, and the vast majority of economists today, over 85%, say it saved us from a depression or further recession. And when it came to the Recovery Act, we decided we had to do something big, which is to put, in addition to the $100 billion in education, $400 million which came here, $48 billion in transportation infrastructure. The largest public work project since the Eisenhower Interstate Highway System. 6,000 miles of rail, 350,000 miles of road, 20,000 bridges repaired, 57,000 miles of broadband and cable, high-speed rail. Here in Rhode Island, the Recovery Act spent $1.7 billion. $187 million for 78 transportation projects. The Jamestown Verrazano Bridge, replacing guardrails. I'm not going to go into it all because it's taking too long. But at the end of the day, it worked. At the end of the day, things had begun to turn around. Now it's time to finish the job. Now it's time to finish the job and put us back in a position where Rhode Island is a genuinely prosperous state, generating good middle-class jobs, because you're going to be attracting. You may not attract the steel mill, but you may attract the next Google. I'm serious. This is stuff that really matters, because you have an educated population. You've demonstrated what you're capable of. Ladies and gentlemen, we can't squander this chance of resurgence. So we have to invest in infrastructure. I know I'm a broken record in this, and I've been all over the country. But it seems to me there's some hope now. Because starting with mayors and governors, there's a growing realization, including some of our Republican colleagues, deciding what in God's name are we doing? Because companies are coming in and saying, I want to be here, but I can't be here if you have no rail system. I can't be here if your bridges are bad. I can't be here if you don't have access to water for me. I can't be here if you don't have broadband connection. I can't be here if. So folks, it's a new competition. And whenever the people of Rhode Island have been in a position to be able to compete on a level playing field, you've done just fine for a couple hundred years. You've done just fine. But unless the infrastructure is improved, you're going to be at an enormous disadvantage. So I just want to end by saying to the delegation, keep making the case for the federal monies. Governor, keep making the case about what is responsible, the responsible thing for us to do. And I used to drive one of those trucks, the horns on them are really loud, especially when you're sitting in your office in the Capitol. But let them blow, man. Let them blow. And I get overwhelming support from the Teamsters Union. I'm one of their best supporters, but let the horns blow. Fix the bridges and the roads. Thank you very much. Thank you all.